Most battles, men fight because they believe they can win. This video is not about those battles. This is about the other kind. The handful of men who look up at an army of 10, 20, 100 times their size, who know, for a cold hard fact, that they are not going home, and who plant their feet anyway. No reinforcements, no escape, no real hope, just the decision to make the enemy pay for every inch. History calls them last stands, and the strangest thing about them is that the men who lost are the ones we still remember. This is the story of 4 of them. I'm Kranky. Let's begin. 2,500 years ago, the largest empire the world had ever seen poured into Greece. The Persian king Xerxes brought an army so big, the Greeks swore it drank rivers dry. Realistically, well over 100,000 men. To stop them, one Spartan king, Leonidas, marched out to a narrow coastal pass called Thermopylae, the Hot Gates, a gap between the mountains and the sea only a few yards wide. There, numbers stopped mattering. A small force could hold a doorway against a flood. And here's what the movie leaves out. It was never just 300 Spartans. Leonidas held that pass with several thousand Greek allies. For 2 days they did the impossible. They threw the greatest empire on earth back, again and again, the Persians dead piling in the surf. Then a local man named Ephialtes sold them out. He showed the Persians a goat path through the mountains. Around the pass, Leonidas was about to be surrounded, so he sent most of the army home and stayed with his 300 Spartans and over 1,000 others who refused to leave, to cover the retreat and buy Greece time. When the Persians demanded they lay down their weapons, the answer came back, "Come and take them." They fought until their spears shattered, then their swords, then with hands and teeth, until arrows blotted out the sun, and the last of them fell on a small hill. Every one of them died, and the legend was born. Jump forward more than 2,000 years to a crumbling old mission in Texas called the Alamo. Inside were a couple hundred Texian rebels. Marching towards them, the Mexican General Santa Anna and an army many times their size. The defenders sent out riders begging for help. Almost none came. For 13 days they held the walls. Their commander, William Travis, supposedly drew a line in the sand and asked every man willing to stay and die to step across it. A great story, though historians doubt it ever happened. What's not in doubt is that they stayed. On the final morning, a Mexican army came over the walls. In a brutal close quarters fighting, nearly every defender was killed. Among them, the famous frontiersman Davy Crockett. Because here's the twist. Losing the Alamo won the war. Those 13 days bought the rest of the Texian army the time it desperately needed. 6 weeks later, screaming, "Remember the Alamo?" they caught Santa Anna by surprise and shattered his army in 18 minutes. The men in the mission were already dead, but they lit the fuse, and it worked. Our last 2 stands happened on the same day, a few miles apart, in southern Africa, and together they are the most extraordinary 24 hours in the history of the British Army. In January 1879, Britain invaded the Zulu Kingdom, confident that rifles would crush an enemy armed mostly with spears. Lord Chelmsford made camp beneath a strange sphinx-shaped mountain called Isandlwana, and then made a fatal mistake. He split his army, marched off chasing a decoy, and left the camp wide open. He never saw the real Zulu army, 20,000 warriors, hidden in a ravine. When a patrol stumbled on them, they rose up and came on in the formation they'd been trained on their whole lives, the horns of the buffalo. two wings sweeping wide to surround the enemy whole. The thin line of British soldiers fought hard, but they were stretched far too thin and swallowed. It became a massacre. Fought hand to hand among the tents, over 1,300 men died. The mightiest empire on earth had just suffered one of the worst defeats in its history at the hands of a primitive army, with not a single tent left standing. And then, that very same evening, a few miles away, it happened again. Except this time, the small force was British. At a tiny mission station called Rorke's Drift, about 150 men, many of them sick, in a makeshift hospital, got word that the army had been wiped out, and that thousands of victorious Zulu were now coming straight for them. They could have run. Instead, they stacked biscuit boxes and bags of grain into walls and decided to hold. Through the entire night, 3,000 to 4,000 Zulu threw themselves at the little perimeter. The hospital caught fire. The defenders dragged the sick out through the flames and fought room to room. The walls shrank, the ammunition ran low, and still, somehow, the line held. By dawn, the Zulu withdrew. 150 men had held off an army. 11 of them were awarded the Victoria Cross, Britain's highest medal for valor, the most ever given to a single regiment for one action. Britain leaned on that one desperate stand to drown out the humiliation of the disaster that morning. So what is it that makes a last stand? It isn't winning. 3 of these 4 ended with almost every man dead. It isn't even the cause. It's the choice. The moment a person looks at certain death, has every reason and every chance to walk away, and decides that some things are worth standing in front of. Thermopylae bought Greece time. The Alamo bought Texas a war. Isandlwana brought a terrible lesson. Rorke's Drift bought a legend. The men mostly didn't live to see what their stand was worth, which is, maybe, the whole point. This was Kranky Battles, where every war is badly drawn. If you'd stand at the wall, subscribe. There are more impossible odds where those came from.